Have you ever wondered what makes society, well, tick? Today, we're going to look at 4 really powerful sociological ideas that might just completely change how you see everything around you, from your daily coffee run all the way to the biggest stories in the news. You've probably heard this famous line from Shakespeare, "All the world's a stage and all the men and women merely players." And you know, for sociologists, that's not just some pretty poetry, it's actually a fantastic starting point for figuring out our social lives.
But okay, that brings up a huge question, right? If our lives really are this grand theatrical play, then who's writing the script? Are we just actors reading our lines, or do we get to improvise?
To start digging into that, let's begin on the smallest scale, right at the personal level, the stage of our everyday face-to-face interactions.
This leads us straight to a sociologist named Erving Goffman and his theory of what he called dramaturgical sociology. Basically, his whole idea was that we should look at human interaction as a kind of performance, where every single one of us is an actor on a stage, constantly trying to manage the impression we're making on our audience.
And Goffman actually uses the language of the theater to break this all down. Think about it. We all play certain roles, right? Like the serious professional at work or the laid-back friend on the weekend. We follow these almost rehearsed scripts when we make small talk. We wear costumes, our clothes, that signal who we are. And all of this plays out on different stages, whether it's an office, a coffee shop, or our living room.
To make this super clear, let's look at a real-world job where this performance is incredibly intense and managed, the flight attendant.
So a researcher named Arlie Hochschild took a deep dive into the lives of flight attendants, and she found that their emotional performance is a massive part of their job. That omnipresent smile isn't just friendly, it's a commercialized emotion. It's literally part of the product. And it gets even more complicated when airlines use ads with slogans like, "Fly me, you'll like it," which kind of sexualizes the role and forces attendants to manage passenger expectations and even fantasies. It is an intensely controlled performance.
Okay, so we've looked at the individual actor on the stage, but let's zoom out a little. What about the rules of the play itself? This brings us to one of the biggest debates in sociology, structure versus agency. It really boils down to these 2 big ideas. On one hand, you've got structure. These are all the patterns that kind of box us in. The laws, the unspoken social rules, the institutions. You can think of it as the script that society gives us. But on the other hand, you have agency, and that's our power as individuals to act independently, to make our own choices, and maybe, just maybe, to go off script.
And different sociological theories tend to focus on one side of this more than the other. You have structural functionalism, which is all about how that script, the structure, keeps society stable and running smoothly. Then there's conflict theory, which looks at how that very same script creates deep inequalities and power struggles. And then you have symbolic interactionism, which zooms right back in on the actors, focusing on how we use our agency to create meaning through our everyday performances.
All right, let's zoom out even further. We've talked about the actor and the script. But who built the theater? And who even decides which plays are allowed to be put on in the first place? This brings us to our third perspective: power, knowledge, and discourse.
And for this, we have to talk about the philosopher Michel Foucault. He came along with this absolutely revolutionary idea that real power isn't just about armies or police or brute force. He argued that power works through what a society decides is knowledge or truth.
Foucault's big idea here is the concept of discourse. Now, this isn't just about language or conversations. A discourse is the entire system of representation. It's the whole set of rules that determines what we can even say, think, or do about a topic at a certain point in history. It literally shapes our reality. So, how does this actually work? Well, take a subject like madness. A discourse gets built when certain statements create a specific kind of knowledge about it. Then rules pop up about what's sayable or even thinkable. It creates subject types like the madman. Certain groups, like doctors, are given the authority to speak the truth about it. And then this leads to actual practices and institutions like asylums. This entire system literally constructs what madness is for that society.
Foucault himself put it perfectly. He said, "Truth is a thing of this world. It is produced only by virtue of multiple forms of constraint, and it induces regular effects of power." What he's saying is, truth and power aren't separate things. They create each other. Okay, we've gone from the actor, to the script, to the very design of the theater. For our last perspective, let's take one final step back. Let's step outside the theater entirely and ask a really big question. Can we ever fully explain the social world? Let's talk about the limits of knowing society.
Some sociologists, believe it or not, borrow ideas from computer science, and they argue that social reality might be what's called maximally complex.
So, what on earth does that mean? It means that the simplest possible explanation for how society works might be just as complicated as society itself. There's no shortcut, no simple formula. It's like trying to make a map of a country, but the only way to make it accurate is for the map to be the same size as the country. It suggests that some parts of our social world might be so complex, they just can't be boiled down to a simple theory.
So, where does all this leave us? We started out seeing ourselves as actors on a stage. Then we learned about the scripts that guide us and the hidden power that builds the whole theater. And we've even thought about the idea that the play might be too complex to ever fully understand. And all of that leads to one final, really important question. If our social world is this massive performance, shaped by all these unseen rules and power structures, what role will you choose to play?